Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the action thriller films from 2016, titled I Am Wrath. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline.
Violent crime has increased 18%. We're receiving word of a police chase that's going on.
The movie begins with news channels blaring out reports of escalating gang violence and rampant murders in the bustling city of Columbus, Ohio. It's over 300 shootings that year and close to 50 gun-related deaths, with the involvement of gangsters in the city. However, in the midst of an unprecedented crime wave in the city, Governor John Messer proudly declares the city's newfound peace, having successfully cut crime rates in half. When questioned by protesters about a proposed pipeline, Messer announces that his office has commissioned its own environmental review to compare with the EPA's audit. Abby Hill and her family are watching the press conference, and they are thrilled that the governor has referenced the work that her mother, Vivian Hill, is doing on the audit. A few days later, Vivian heads to the airport to pick up her husband, Stanley Hill, who's returning from a job interview in California. However, when the happy couple reaches the parking lot, they find their car tire flat, so Stanley helps her change it. But then, a stranger approaches them for some money, and is politely refused by Stanley for some reason. Suddenly, Stanley is attacked from the back by another person, who is supposed to be teamed up with the first guy. While brutally beating Stanley, one of the attackers with a fly tattoo on his face stabs Vivian, and loots her purse to run away. After the group escapes, Stanley, who is in worse condition, gets up and rushes to Vivian, only to discover her dead, leaving him in a heart-wrenching state. Devastated, Stanley visits the police station, and reports the criminals to Detectives Gibson and Walker. Detective Walker then asks Stanley out of the blue if his relationship with his wife is fine, which irritates Stanley. For Vivian's last rituals, the husband visits her in the church, but unable to face the grief, he quickly leaves the place before people's arrival. The news of Vivian's death becomes national headlines, resulting in Messer sending his condolences to her family since Vivian is one of the auditors in his office. The governor promises to help find the perpetrators responsible for the heinous crime. The coming day, on the detective's call, Stanley revisits the police station to identify the criminals involved in the incident. He meticulously scans the lineup, and manages to point out the real culprit based on his descriptions. But even though Stanley positively identified him in the lineup, the detectives let the attacker walk free. By confronting the detectives, Stanley demands an explanation for their unprofessional behavior. However, their unsatisfactory response that there isn't enough evidence only adds to his despair, so he decides to leave since he can do nothing about it. As Stanley returns from the police station, he meets Abby to inform her of the corrupt police investigation. But his anger and frustration boil over when he spots Vivian's killer wandering on the streets freely. In a fit of wrath, he storms back to his place, and demolishes his dressing wall, revealing a mysterious black envelope stuffed with different passports, foreign currencies and deadly weapons. It's a stark reminder of the shady past Stanley left behind, before tying the knot with Vivian. Stanley contacts his old colleague and fellow badass in the past, Dennis, in order to find those responsible for Vivian's death. By heading to his barber shop, Stanley reunites with Dennis, a former Special Forces comrade from 20 years ago. Dennis pleads with Stanley to rethink his desire for revenge, but Stanley is unmoved by Dennis's words, because he is so set on exacting vengeance for the death of his wife. With the names of the culprits in his grasp, Dennis says that cops haul them 10 times a year, but strangely nothing ever happens. Afterwards, Stanley sets his sights on tracking them down. His first move is to go undercover as a gangster and ghost one of the culprits, Nathan, in a nearby club. Nathan is seen giving his girlfriend the stolen purse that was taken from Vivian in the parking lot earlier. When Stanley keeps a close eye on Nathan, Nathan becomes increasingly uneasy under his gaze. Suddenly, Nathan smashes his whiskey glass in a desperate attempt to find out his identity, and soon after recognizing him, he runs away. A frantic chase ensues, with Stanley hot on his heels. The two then encounter each other behind the bar, and Stanley manages to take down Nathan. As he stands over the fallen man, ready to deliver the killing blow, the man hints that Vivian's murder was more than just a robbery. And then when things start to heat up, Dennis shows up. As Dennis arrives at the scene, they dispose of Nathan's lifeless body by tossing it into a garbage can and setting it on fire. Little do they know, a member of Nathan's gang has captured their heinous act on camera. He wastes no time in reporting it to the notorious city crime lord, Lemuel Lemmy K. The crime lord shows his violent side by ordering his crew to cut this guy's finger off, claiming that he should be helping Nathan instead of recording. Lemmy K then orders his crew to inform Charlie Fly, the man responsible for Vivian's murder, that he wants him to kill Stanley and Dennis. But before they can be found and eliminated, Dennis manages to spirit Stanley away to the safety of his basement in the barbershop, which doubles as a secret training chamber and weapons cache from his days as a force member. With the broken phone they took from Nathan's corpse, Dennis hacks into the device and uncovers a single contact. Suspecting that it could belong to Charlie or one of his accomplices named Lars, they try to dial the number. Here they discover that it belongs to the zombie tattoo shop where Lars works, potentially leading them closer to the truth behind Vivian's murder. In the meantime, Lemmy K calls Detective Gibson and Walker, wanting them to find the culprits responsible for ghosting his men. As we delve deeper into the case, a shocking revelation comes to light. The corrupt detectives are in cahoots with Lemmy K to keep his men out of prison, all in exchange for his silence on Governor Messerv's son's damning video. In the footage, the governor's son is seen committing the brutal crime of killing his girlfriend after giving her crystal drugs. Lemmy K has threatened to leak the video if the detectives fail to capture the perpetrators responsible for cutting down his men. Afterwards, Gibson meets Governor Messerv, and tells him everything about Lemmy K's men. Since they don't know who the perpetrators are or what their motive is, the governor pushes the detective to find out, so that his son's video doesn't get leaked. Meanwhile, Stanley has reached Zombie Tattoo, intent on taking down Lars, but he finds another worker there instead. On the other hand, Dennis rushes to his shop upon hearing the alarm, only to find himself face to face with Charlie Flies and his gang. As Charlie tries to extract Stanley's name from Dennis by force, he quickly realizes that he has underestimated the resourceful barber. With his skillful moves, Dennis manages to beat them up, emerging victorious from the dangerous situation. The bullets rain down on his fellow gang members, while Charlie escapes unscathed. Back to Stanley, while taking the tattoo of I Am Wrath on his back, Lars starts to get suspicious when Stanley keeps mentioning Charlie's name, and demands Stanley to reveal his identity. In a rage, Stanley attacks him, wanting him to unveil Charlie's location. Even with a cutter pressed against his neck, Lars refuses to tell him, prompting Stanley to slit his throat. Stanley then steals Lars' drug shipment, and reunites with Dennis at some place, where they dispose of the bodies. Haunted by the guilt of his past life as a gangster and the loss of his beloved Vivian, Stanley seeks solace at church. It is there that he confides in a priest, confessing his sins and begging for forgiveness. Meanwhile, Abby arrives at Stanley's home to collect Vivian's belongings, only to discover guns and gangster portfolios scattered around. But before she and her husband can leave, Charlie and his men ambush them, firing rounds at her car and leaving her husband injured. Stanley arrives just in time to clear up the confusion, and Abby is mad at him for causing this to happen. We move to the governor's mansion. Messerv learns of more of Lemmy K's crew's deaths, so he says that he's done with the amateurs, and needs professionals to finish the job of hunting the perpetrators. Meanwhile, Lemmy K's irritation peaks when he learns that someone has stolen his drug shipment, so he issues a warning to Charlie. Stanley, on the other hand, is hiding in the barbershop basement, and he manages to snag Charlie's number by stealing Lars' phone. With the promise of the missing goods, Stanley tricks the desperate Charlie into going to a Korean club, where he waits for him alongside Dennis. Once inside the VIP room, Charlie's paranoia gets the better of him, and he mistakes another stranger for the thief who stole his shipment. The situation quickly spirals out of control when the man and his bodyguard draw their guns, and Stanley bursts into the VIP room without permission. Amidst the chaos, Stanley manages to corner Charlie, and demand answers regarding Vivian's murder, and Charlie lets slip that Lemmy K was responsible. Running out of time, Stanley pulls the trigger, ending Charlie's life on the spot. As the gunmen rapidly approach the scene, Dennis and Stanley make a frantic escape, facing them off with unwavering teamwork. They manage to take them down, and flee just in time to avoid the arrival of the police. Reaching back at the basement, after Dennis reveals the dangerous truth about psycho gangster Lemmy K, Stanley orders his family to pack up and move to a hotel for safety the next day. When Stanley returns to his house, he stumbles upon a shocking report revealing that Vivian, who worked for the governor, was forced to put the public's water safety at risk for profits in the pipeline project. Stanley then checks Vivian's voicemail, only to discover that she was pressured by Messerv to cover up the water contamination dangers of the project. This leads Stanley to think that Vivian's murder was orchestrated to cover up the results of her review. Meanwhile, as Abby and her family attempt to leave, they are suddenly ambushed by Lemmy K and his crew. Lemmy K forces Abby to call her father, just before the situation quickly spirals out of control. In a daring move, Abby tries to defend herself and her family by attacking Lemmy K's henchman with a knife, but Lemmy K retaliates by shooting down Abby's daughter, leaving the fate of her family hanging in the balance. Under Lemmy K's pressure, Abby quickly sends a text message to Stanley, calling her son Joey instead of Jimmy to warn him about the danger. Stanley gets the message loud and clear, and alerts his friend Dennis for backup. Upon arriving at the scene, Stanley enters through the back door, and manages to take down one of Lemmy K's men. But his victory is short-lived as Lemmy K captures Abby and forces Stanley to surrender his weapon. Just as things seem bleak, Dennis arrives in time, and takes a shot at Lemmy K with his trusty sniper. Seizing the opportunity, Stanley unleashes his fury on Lemmy K. Meanwhile, Dennis is caught off guard and is shot by one of Lemmy K's men. Despite falling from the railing, Dennis bounces back with fierce determination, and takes down the shooter. Stanley defeats Lemmy K in a fight that lasts only a few seconds, and with Lemmy K subdued, Stanley tries to extract information about Vivian's murder from him. However, before Lemmy K can reveal the true culprit, he is ruthlessly gunned down by the corrupt Detective Gibson. Gibson tries to manipulate Stanley into taking the easy way out, but Stanley refuses to compromise his integrity. This leads to a confrontation with Gibson's backup Detective Walker, who is taken down by Dennis as he emerges from behind. Gibson tries to negotiate with Stanley again, but Stanley isn't having any of it, and handcuffs Gibson to the steering wheel of his car. With Walker locked in the trunk, Stanley makes Gibson drive him to Messerv's mansion, determined to uncover the truth behind Vivian's murder. On their way to the mansion, Gibson drops a bombshell on Stanley, revealing the truth about Lemmy K and the governor, and why Lemmy K and his men are untouchable. Upon arriving at the mansion, Gibson pleads with Stanley to release him from his cuffs so he can talk to the governor, but Stanley knocks him unconscious with a blow to the head. As soon as Gibson opens his eyes, he finds that the governor's outside guards has been taken down. To make matters worse, before he finds a way to free himself, Stanley has prepared to blow up the car, and Walker barely manages to escape the trunk cage. With ease, Stanley takes down the remaining security guards and storms into the mansion. He finally comes face to face with Governor Messerv, who promptly shoots him with a shotgun. But Messerv gains the upper hand and holds his shotgun to Stanley's head. In a moment of intense emotion, Messerv confesses to killing Stanley's wife, Vivian, due to her unwillingness to aid him in his deceitful ways. In a fit of rage, Stanley turns the situation around and stabs Messerv, killing him instantly.
Who the hell are you? Embrath.
As word spreads that someone broke into the governor's house, a lot of police arrive and surround the mansion. Stanley emerges from the house, brandishing Messerv's shotgun, and when ordered to drop it, he instead points it at the police, causing them to open fire. The hail of bullets knocks Stanley to the ground, but miraculously, he survives, thanks to the bulletproof jacket Dennis gave him. Despite being in police custody, Stanley's daughter Abby is not allowed to visit him in the hospital. She is convinced that her father will be sent to someplace where he will never be seen again, so she bursts into Rath's hospital room to give him a farewell hug. Later that night, 2 police officers are appointed outside Stanley's room in the hospital, and the coming police officers have Walker as one of them. After being demoted to patrol police, Walker sneaks into Stanley's room with the intention of killing him. By accusing Stanley of trying to escape custody, he points his gun at him. But in a dramatic turn of events, it turns out that Abby had left a gun disguised as a hug for her father. Stanley shoots him down, and it is revealed that Dennis has already sneaked into the room. Disguised as a doctor, Dennis manages to escape with Stanley, and they flee to Sao Paulo, Brazil. Sometime later, Abby receives a postcard from her father, thanking her for her help and assuring her of his safety. After getting his revenge on the governor for killing his beloved wife, Stanley finally gets the peace and justice he deserves. Okay guys, that's all the recap of I Am Wrath 2016. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.